The wail cut through the desert's dawn like a blade through flesh. Jacob Holt staggered, one hand pressed against the bullet hole in his chest, blood seeping between his fingers. He was a dead man walking, and he knew it. The cry had to be a trick of his fading mind. Babies didn't wail out here in the wasteland, not where men like him bled out alone. But it came again, sharp and desperate, pulling him toward it like a rope around his soul. Each step sent fire through his ribs. The bullet, courtesy of the Baxter gang's sharpest shooter, had found its mark 4 hours ago. Jacob had taken down 2 of them before the third escaped, leaving him to die slow and painful, just as he'd always expected. Now, the crying grew louder, guiding him around a cluster of sun-bleached rocks. What he saw stopped his heart faster than the bullet ever could. There, in the middle of nowhere, sat a small pine coffin, child-sized. From inside came the unmistakable sound of a baby's cries, frantic and alive. Jacob fell to his knees beside it, vision swimming. The lid was slightly ajar, and through the gap, a tiny fist waved. Someone had left a living baby in a coffin to die under the merciless desert sun. His trembling hands lifted the lid. Inside lay a boy, maybe 6 months old, wrapped in a filthy blanket. The child's face was red from crying, but his eyes were bright, locking onto Jacob's with an intensity that shook him. Then he saw it carved into the inside of the coffin lid in crude, deep letters, Jacob Holt. His own name. Someone had known he'd find this. Someone had wanted him to. The baby reached out, tiny fingers grasping, and something broke inside Jacob, deeper than the wound in his chest. In 40 years of living by the gun, he'd never held a child, never thought he deserved to touch something so pure with hands stained by blood. But as the baby's cries weakened, Jacob knew the truth. This child would die out here if he didn't act, and he was dying too. 12 lives tethered by a thread in the desert's cruel embrace. Jacob lifted the baby from the coffin, hands shaking. The child quieted, tiny fingers clutching his vest. For the first time in years, Jacob felt something other than emptiness, a spark of purpose. But questions burned hotter than his wound. Who had done this? Who knew his name, his route, his fate? Why use a child as bait? The sun climbed, casting long shadows. Staying here meant death for both. Without water, the baby wouldn't last 2 hours. Jacob had maybe 3 before blood loss claimed him, less with the extra weight. His horse, Shadow, stood 30 yards away, ears twitching nervously. Shadow had carried him through 7 years of gunfights, but never with a baby in tow. Jacob stumbled to the horse, cradling the child in his left arm. Mounting sent lightning through his chest, but the baby's dark eyes held his. Too wise for someone so young. Shadow began a steady walk toward town. Jacob's mind raced. Willow Creek was 10 miles east, too far for a dying man. But there was something closer, the old Carson Ranch, abandoned for 4 years since fever took the family. If he could make it there, he might find supplies, maybe answers. The baby made soft sounds, not crying but not content. Jacob realized the child was hungry. How long had he been out there left to die? The coffin wasn't a grave, it was a message. Someone knew Jacob's movements, knew he'd survived the Baxter gang long enough to find it. But why? Shadow stumbled, and Jacob's vision blurred. Blood loss was catching up. He pressed his hand harder against the wound, but it was like trying to hold back a flood. The baby's eyes never left his, as if sensing their shared peril. Then Jacob saw it, smoke rising in the distance, not from the Carson place, but somewhere closer. Someone had lit a fire, and it was in his path. His free hand drifted to his gun, but the movement sent fresh pain through him. If this was a trap, he was riding into it with a dying body and a helpless child. Yet turning back meant certain death. As Shadow carried them toward the smoke, Jacob felt the weight of a game he didn't understand. Was he saving this child, or was this child about to get them both killed? The smoke came from the Carson Ranch after all. As Shadow crested a low hill, Jacob saw a figure moving near the abandoned homestead, a woman in a faded gray dress, tending a fire outside the old cabin. She looked up as he approached, and Jacob's blood ran cold. He knew that face, Clara Mendez, the widow of the man he'd killed in Redstone 3 years ago. She'd sworn over her husband's grave that Jacob would pay for leaving her children fatherless. Rumor had it she'd fled to California after robbing a stagecoach. Now she was here, with a fire burning and supplies laid out like she'd been expecting him. The baby stirred as Shadow slowed to a stop 20 feet from the cabin. Clara stood, hands empty but eyes dark with something worse than hate. She was older now, grief etched deep around her mouth, but her stance was steady, dangerous. "Jacob Holt," she said, her voice clear across the desert air. "Right on time." "Clara," he rasped, "you left the baby." "My grandson," she said simply. "Raymond's boy. Born 4 months ago." The pieces clicked like a gun's hammer. Ramon Mendez, Clara's son, the hothead who'd ridden with the Baxter gang, the third shooter who'd escaped after putting a bullet in Jacob's chest. "Your boy tried to kill me this morning," Jacob said, adjusting his grip on the baby. "And you used his son as bait." Clara's laugh was bitter as the desert wind. "That baby's name is Mateo. Mateo Mendez, not Mateo Holt. You're not saving him, Gunslinger. You're delivering him." The trap tightened like a noose. Jacob's gun hand was his right, but the baby was in his left arm, and blood loss made him too slow to draw. Clara had positioned herself perfect, like close enough to talk, far enough to react. "The coffin," he said, mind racing. "You carved my name in it. Where dead men belong," she replied. "Ramon couldn't kill you clean, so I made sure you'd find Mateo. You could die alone or die knowing you'd saved the child of the man you murdered." Mateo made a soft sound, and Clara's expression cracked a grandmother's love breaking through her vengeance. "But here's what Ramon doesn't know," she continued, hand moving behind her back. "That baby's sick. Heart condition. Needs medicine we can't afford." Jacob understood. This wasn't just revenge, it was desperation. "You want my money." "I want you dead," Clara corrected. "But I'll take your money and your bounty. Word is you're worth $3,000, plus whatever you're carrying." Mateo's breathing grew shallower, tiny tremors running through him. Clara wasn't lying about the sickness. "What's wrong with him?" Jacob asked, voice softer than it had been in years. "Heart defect," Clara said, her voice breaking. "Needs surgery back east. Costs more than we'll ever see." Jacob had $5,000 in his saddlebags, blood money from years of bounties and gunfights. "You can have it all," he said, "but let me take him to a doctor first." Clara's hand emerged, holding an old army revolver, her husband's, if Jacob remembered right. "You think I'd trust the man who killed Javier?" "I'm dying anyway," Jacob said, nodding to the blood soaking his shirt. 2 hours left, maybe 3. But Mateo could live if we stopped talking and move. Clara's gun wavered, grandmother warring with widow. "Why would you help him?" Mateo made a small sound, and Jacob looked into those dark eyes. "Because some things matter more than dying angry." The desert fell silent except for the fire's crackle and Mateo's labored breathing. Clara's gun stayed raised, but her finger eased off the trigger. "Raymond's in Willow Creek," she said finally. "He sees you with his boy. He'll shoot you on sight. Then ride with us and make sure he doesn't." Clara laughed, humorless. "You want me to save the man who killed my husband? I want you to save your grandson." Mateo's breathing grew more shallow, lips tinting blue. Jacob felt panic surge. "He's getting worse. We need to move now." Clara saw it too. Her gun lowered as she stepped forward, reaching for Mateo. As her hands touched him, his breathing steadied slightly, as if family gave him strength. "There's a wagon behind the cabin," she said, voice thick. "Ramon brought supplies, thinking we'd need them after. Get it hitched fast." But then Jacob heard his hoof beats, multiple horses, riding hard. Ramon wasn't in Willow Creek. He was coming here, and he wasn't alone. 3 riders crested the ridge, dust trailing behind them. Ramon Mendez rode in front, face twisted with rage. The two flanking him were Baxter gang survivorsmen who'd shoot first and never ask questions. Clara froze halfway to the wagon. "Ramon, no." Her voice was lost in the hoof beats. Jacob had seconds to decide. He could draw one-handed while holding Mateo, but he'd likely miss. He could hand the baby to Clara and fight, leaving Mateo in the crossfire. Or he could do something unthinkable for a man who'd lived by the gun, surrender. "Clara," he called, "take him." She rushed back as the riders thundered into the clearing. Jacob transferred Mateo to her arms, the baby's breathing barely visible. Raymond's horse skidded to a stop, gun drawn before the dust settled. "Get away from him, Mama," Ramon shouted, aiming at Jacob. "Get away from that baby killer." "Ramon, stop." Clara stepped between them, Mateo cradled tight. "He's trying to help." "Help," Raymond's voice cracked. "He killed Papa. He's why Mateo's dying." The other riders flanked the scene. Jacob recognized them, Eli Baxter and his brother Tom. Outlaws who'd use Raymond's grief for their own gain. "Boy's right," Eli said, gun drawn. "Holt's got a bounty worth more than this baby's medicine. We finish him, collect the money, everybody wins." "Except Mateo," Jacob said, hands raised. "Your boy needs a doctor in Tucson. Kill me now, you'll never have enough to save him." Raymond's gun wavered. "You're lying." $5,000 in my saddlebags," Jacob said. "Enough for the surgery, but only if we get him to a doctor in hours." Clara clutched Mateo tighter, his breathing erratic. "Ramon, listen to him. Mateo's getting worse. After what he did to Papa, you want me to trust him? I want you to save your son." The standoff stretched, sun climbing higher, each minute stealing Mateo's time. Eli spat in the dust. "Enough talking. We came for a bounty, not a sob story." But Tom Baxter was staring at Mateo, and something shifted in his eyes. "Eli," he said quietly, "that baby looks real sick." "So what? So I got a kid too, back in Nevada." Jacob seized the crack in their resolve. "Then you know what it's like, watching your child suffer and not being able to help." Raymond's gun shook. Ellie's finger tightened on the trigger. The air was thick with the promise of violence. Ellie's patience snapped. "Tom, what's wrong with you? We didn't ride out here to play nursemaid." "Maybe we should hear him out," Tom said, gun still raised. "Hear him out." Ellie's gun swung toward his brother. "He's worth $3,000, and you want to talk?" Raymond's face was a storm of rage and desperation. Clara whispered, "Ramon, Mateo doesn't have time." Mateo's lips were blue, his chest barely moving. Jacob had seen death enough to know it was close. "The wagon," he said to Ramon. "Hitch it up. We can argue my bounty after we save your boy." "Don't listen," Eli shouted. "He's trying to escape." "Where am I escaping to?" Jacob gestured to his blood-soaked shirt. "I'm dying. But Mateo doesn't have to." Raymond's gun lowered slightly. For a moment, Jacob thought he'd choose his son. But Eli had other plans. "Fine," he said, aiming at Jacob. "We'll collect the bounty now." The shot rang out, but it wasn't Ellie's gun. Tom had fired, putting a bullet in his brother's shoulder. Eli spun to the ground, cursing. "Tom, what the hell?" "I told you," Tom said, gun smoking. "I got a kid too." The violence broke Raymond's trance. He holstered his gun and took Mateo from Clara, the baby so still Jacob feared they were too late. "He's still breathing," Ramon said, voice breaking. "Barely." Clara ran to the cabin. "The wagon's ready. Ramon, help me get him in." Eli, wounded but not done, reached for his gun with his good hand. Jacob drew and fired, the bullet kicking up dirt near Ellie's hand. "Next one won't miss," he said, though drawing nearly made him faint. "This ain't over, Holt," Eli spat. "Yes, it is," Tom said, helping Eli up. "Pete, we're leaving." As the Baxters rode off, Eli cursing, Jacob slumped in the saddle, shadow keeping him upright. "Ramon," Clara called. "We need to go now." Ramon looked between his son and Jacob. The impossible choice was clear. "Help me get him in the wagon," he said to Clara. "You mean he's coming with us?" Clara's eyes widened. "Mateo needs that money, and Holt's the only one who knows where it is." They moved Jacob to the wagon bed, Mateo beside him. As Clara took the reins and Ramon rode alongside, Jacob felt a flicker of something like redemption. Maybe Mateo would live. Maybe some good could come from his blood-stained hands. But the dessert wasn't done with them yet. The wagon rattled over the hardpan, Clara pushing the horses to hard. Each jolt sent pain through Jacob's chest, but he stayed silent. Mateo's breathing was shallow, barely visible. Ramon scanned the horizon, knowing Eli Baxter wouldn't let a $3,000 bounty go easily. "How much further?" Clara called. "For miles," Ramon answered, voice tight. For miles was too far for either passenger. Jacob pulled a leather pouch from his vest, pain pills from Doc Warner, strong enough to kill if overdosed. "Clara," he said weakly. Stop the wagon. We can't stop. Mateo's getting worse. That's why we need to stop. Clara halted the horses. Ramon dismounted, face etched with fear. Jacob held up the pouch. Pain medicine. Might slow his heart, make him need less oxygen. Raymond's eyes narrowed. You want to drug my baby? I want to keep him alive long enough for the doctor. It's risky, but doing nothing is death. Clara looked at Mateo, lips nearly purple. How much? Quarter of a pill, dissolved in water. Might by an hour, maybe 2. Raymond's hands shook as he took the pouch. What if it kills him? What if it saves him? Ramon stared at his son, then broke off a quarter pill. Clara had a canteen, and they dissolved it carefully. Getting it into Mateo was agonizingly slow, the baby too weak to swallow easily. But finally, it went down. Within minutes, Mateo's breathing stabilized, not better, but not worse. It's working, Clara whispered. Ramon remounted. Let's go. But then Jacob heard hoofbeat 6 riders, coming fast. Eli Baxter had found reinforcements, and they weren't coming to talk. Jacob forced himself up, gun heavy in his hand. Through the dust, he saw Ellie's face, rage twisting it. The Baxters wanted revenge and the bounty, and they'd kill everyone to get it. Clara, he said, we've got company. She saw the dust cloud, grip tightening on the reins. How long before they catch us? 10 minutes, maybe less. Ramon spurred his horse closer, gun drawn. We can't outrun them with the wagon. Jacob knew what that meant. Someone had to stay behind, and there was only one person already dying. Stop the wagon, he said. What? Clara's voice cracked. Stop it now. If we run, they'll catch us in the open. Here, we've got cover. Raymond's face was grim. You want to make a stand? There's 6 of them. I'm not much good in a gunfight, Jacob said, climbing out of the wagon. Take Mateo and run. There's a wash a quarter-mile north. Get to it, then to Willow Creek. Clara helped him down. You can barely stand. How will you fight 6 men? Jacob checked his gun for bullets. I'm not planning to win. Just buy you time. No, Ramon said. I won't let another man die for my family. Your family, Jacob said, meeting his eyes. You've got more courage than your daddy ever did. The insult didn't sting. Ramon smiled grimly. Papa said courage is doing what's right when you're scared. The hoof beats shook the ground. Mateo stirred, medicine holding him steady. Clara, Jacob said, take him and go. But Clara grabbed her husband's rifle from the wagon. Javier died defending our family. Maybe it's time I did too. They formed a triangle round the wagon, Jacob behind the bed, Ramon near the wheel, Clara by the barrel, Mateo in her arms. The riders pulled up 50 yards away, just out of pistol range. Smart move, Holt, Eli shouted, arm in a sling. You cost me a fortune. Time to pay. The only thing I owe you is a bullet, Jacob called, voice stronger than he felt. 6 against 3, Eli laughed. I like those odds. Jacob noticed Tom Baxter wasn't with them. Where was he? The standoff held, taut as a wire. Mateo made a soft sound, content, the medicine giving him strength. That sound shifted the air. Eli drew, and the shooting began. Jacob's first shot dropped the rider on Ellie's left. His second went wide, pain flaring. Raymond's shot missed, but Clara's rifle took down another man. 3 against 6 was still losing odds, and Jacob's vision blurred, hands shaking. Ellie's shot splintered wood near Jacob's head. The next would likely be his last. But then a rifle cracked from the ridge behind Ellie's gang. One of Ellie's men fell, and chaos erupted. Tom Baxter had returned with help. Caught between 2 groups, Ellie's gang faltered. Jacob smiled. Maybe Mateo would make it. Maybe some stories had happy endings, even in the desert. The gunfight was brutal but quick. When the dust settled, Eli lay dead, his men fleeing. Tom emerged with 2 strangers. Told you this ain't over, he said, looking at Ellie's body. Guess I was wrong. Clara held Mateo, his breathing steady. The path to Willow Creek was clear. Jacob's legs gave out, and he sank against the wagon wheel, vision darkening. Ramon, he said, my saddlebags. $5,000. Get your boy to that doctor. As Ramon retrieved the money, Jacob closed his eyes, peace washing over him for the first time in 40 years. The desert sun burned, but Jacob wasn't running. He was where he needed to be, doing what needed to be done. The wagon reached Willow Creek as the sun dipped low. Doc Warner was waiting, alerted by a rider Tom had sent ahead. Mateo was rushed inside, the $5,000 ensuring the best care until he could be moved to Tucson for surgery. The doctor said the medicine had bought critical Mateo would live. Jacob didn't make it to the clinic. He died in the wagon, his last breath taken as Ramon promised to get Mateo to the surgeon. Clara wept, not for Jacob, but for the strange mercy that had saved her grandson. Ramon buried Jacob on a hill overlooking the desert. A simple marker reading, Jacob Holt. He gave all. Mateo grew strong, his heart mended by the Tucson surgeon. Ramon and Clara rebuilt their lives. The blood money turned into a legacy of hope. The desert kept its secrets, but the story of the gunslinger and the baby spread. A tale of redemption etched in sand and blood. What did you think of Jacob's journey? Did he redeem himself, or was his sacrifice just another act of a violent life? How do you view the cycle of violence and injustice in this story? Can it ever be broken? Share your stance in the comments below. Your perspective matters, and we'd love to hear it.